Well, if you have your Bibles today, we're going to be in the Gospel of John, chapter 18 at least, and then we're going to be kind of moving into different areas today as we talk about this issue of what is truth today. And I recently saw two men debating about a political issue, and I know that's not ever a good way to start a message, but they were talking about, I can't even remember exactly what it was, but as they were kind of debating one another, I remember one of them was after one of the men had made his point, the other person looked at him and responded, "Well, I know that that's true for you, but it's not true for me." And when I heard that, I was amazed that the guy that he was talking to and saying that to didn't respond. Well, true is true. And that's what I want to look at today, because what is truth? We are living in an age when the definition of truth itself is being debated, I think, like it's never been before. But it's not a new issue, as we're going to see this morning. In John chapter 18, verse 38, Pontius Pilate, as Jesus is standing before him, asks that incredible question to him, what is truth? And so that's what I want to base things on this morning. I want to spend some time talking about the importance of truth and how it impacts our lives and the lives around us, and why it's important for us as followers of Jesus Christ especially to deal with this particular issue, because it's becoming more and more of an issue in the culture in which we live. Let's define truth this morning, and even this, as we're going to see in a moment, is hard to define. Truth is that which conforms to reality or facts or actuality. In other words, when we say something is true, as we look around in the lives that were around us, in the world in which we live, we can obviously say, well, that corresponds with reality, okay? And an author had this to say about this definition, though. He said this: "But this basic definition is not complete because its definition is open to interpretation and a wide variety of applications." He says, what is reality? What is fact? What is actuality? How does perception affect truth? And that's our issue today that I want to really focus in on. Is truth relative? That's really what he was asking in this question. Is there a relativity to that? Well, let's go back to the Gospel of John and look again at the setting in which Pilate asked that question, what is truth? And so in John chapter 18, verses 37 and 38, we read this: "You are a king then," Pilate said. And I'm going to read up off this screen, I think. "Jesus answered, 'You are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to what? To the truth.'" Now, this is the important statement, this last sentence in this verse. "Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." Okay? This is when Pilate asked that great question. But what is truth? Pilate asked. Now, look at what he does in this moment. With this, he went out again to the Jews and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." Jesus has just told him what? Everybody on the side of truth listens to me. And Pilate, when he hears that, simply asks, what is truth? And he walks away from what? The one that can actually answer the question. It says he goes immediately outside and says, "I can't find any fault in this guy. I don't know why we would want him killed in the end." Well, as we look at this, you notice that as Pilate is asking this, he doesn't listen. Okay? And that's one of our issues today, isn't it, when we're talking about the issue of truth in our culture. It seems like people are so busy talking that we don't have any time to listen to each other, to opposing points of view and those sorts of things. Seems like when there's an opposing point of view, many people do what Pilate did here. instead of sitting and saying, well, tell me about that, we just turn away, or people just turn away. I don't want to hear that. I'm going to move in my own direction. What Jesus was saying here is that if we want to know what is true, then we need to do what? What did he say? You have to listen to me. Okay? You have to listen to me. But that's the rub in people today. We don't want to listen to Jesus. Actually, we don't want to listen to each other, do we? Not really. It seems like when we're talking these days and when we see it even in the public discourse around us, whether it's the political arena or whether it's on the college campuses today or whatever, when we hear opposing views, what almost instantly happens? This is what instantly happens. Okay, instead of talking with each other and saying, I don't agree with that, or tell me why you believe that, we go straight to what? Conflict. Okay? If I can just yell louder than you, I won't have to listen to what you have to say. And so we see that truth often seems to be related more to opinion than to, as we've defined it here, reality, fact, or actuality in what we're listening to or looking at. The author simply implies in these words that I mentioned earlier that it seems like we have to define what reality is. We have to define what we're looking at today as to whether that's even valid. He's really saying, I think truth is relative. It depends on your opinion at the moment. Okay? And that seems to be a lot of how we base truth in our culture today, isn't it? What's the latest poll say? Or ultimately, what does Oprah say? Or someone else that is the spokesman, our nighttime funny men that come on TV and those sorts of things. And we have to ask that question, is truth relative? And the answer to that is what? No. No, it's not. Truth, by its very definition, is exclusive. Okay? By that I mean that, let me give you an illustration. What color is the sky? Blue. Now, don't ask Steve or Jackie because they have hues that they go with. There's some greens and, depends on the storm out there or whatever. Okay, but typically we would say what? Okay, it's blue. No, I think it's black. Okay, who's right? Well, you guys think you're right. I just might not even talk to you anymore. Okay, that's what I mean by the fact that truth is exclusive. When we have basically two opposing points of view, and one person says about the sky it's blue and one says it's black, and the one says, well, I know that's true for you. You think the sky is blue, but for me it's black. Okay? The truth is, both of those statements cannot be what? True. They can't be true. At the same time, they can't have two opposing views. And that's what I mean by truth being exclusive. Okay? When we're talking about that. And so as we're talking with people today in our culture, that's what we have to get down to. We have to help them understand when a person says to me, I know that's true to you, but it's not to me. Well, it can't be both ways. Okay? Either it is or it's not. And that's one of our issues today too, is what? Absolutes. Okay? What is absolutely right? What is absolutely wrong? Well, there's a great debate about that as well. And by the way, this is the reaping that we're experiencing now as a result of evolution being taught in our schools. Okay? When it's all about secularism and humanism, and there's no God basis for this, this is why we're at where we are. This is why I believe a great chef this week took his life in France. This is why a great woman who was apparently a fashion designer took her life this week in the United States. Now, all the debate's been around mental illness. Well, that may have been part of it, but when you have nothing to look forward in your life, when there's no purpose, that is the result. So where do we find truth in the world that's filled with opposing views? Where do we find it? Right here. Okay, right here. This is the truth. Jesus said, what? I am the one who speaks the truth. If you want the truth, you'll listen to me. Well, who has inspired this? Well, God has inspired this. Who is Jesus Christ? Well, he's God. Okay? So what Jesus was saying there to Pilate, if you really want to know the truth, you're going to listen to God. If you want to really know what's going on, this is what you have to do. Well, let's read in John chapter 1. These are familiar passages to us. John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. Especially the very first verse, we often have seen this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, who's the Word here? Jesus, okay? He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but what? The darkness has not understood. Okay, this is so important for us when we're talking about truth, because all of us, by God's definition, are what? We're all sinners. We have all fallen short of the glory of God. Because of that sin nature, what do we prefer, light or dark? We prefer dark. Why? Because our deeds are evil. Okay? And so we kind of prefer that. And so when Jesus said to Pilate, if you really want an answer to your question, then you're going to listen to me, because I'm the true source of I'm the source of what is true and what is not. So where's the confusion come from? Where's this issue of what is true and what's not true really coming from? Well, listen to this quote from Billy Graham some years ago that I found while I was preparing for this today. He said this: Jesus wasn't afraid to call Satan what he was, a liar and the father of lies. Jesus said there's no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of lies. John 8:44. The first time that man had to make a choice between God's truth and the devil's lie, he chose the devil's lie. When Adam and Eve rejected God's truth and accepted the devil's lie, that was the moment that all the troubles of the whole world began. Our sinful nature often sides with the devil's lie instead of God's truth because we're sinners. We'd rather believe the devil's lie than God's truth. End quote. When Adam and Eve chose to eat the fruit that day, what they were really saying to God was what? We are going to determine what is right and what is wrong. We are going to determine what is true and what is false. How's that worked out for us? That's why we're confused today, okay? And we're becoming even more confused. The more we remove God from our conversations and from our lives, the more confused we are. So it's not a surprise to me to see what's happening on the college campuses and in the debate that we're seeing in the political arena. The farther we are removed from God, the more confused we are. The more confused we are. You see, we have a problem with knowing what's true and false, and that problem is a result of our sin natures. Sin just clouds our ability, doesn't it, to make right decisions and even wrong decisions. So why make such a big issue, I guess, when I was thinking about this week, why make such a big issue of this? It's because this is something we are really struggling in a big way, I believe, in our culture today. And I want to look at a few different things that we're dealing with today that we didn't deal with even 10 years ago in our culture today, and see how you want to answer this. What's one issue? Well, the first issue I want to look at is, what's the definition of marriage? Anybody want to answer that? Okay. Okay, so where do you find that, though? Okay, well, I know it's in the Bible. Where is it in the Bible? Okay, it's right in Genesis chapter 2. After God creates Adam and Eve, he puts them in the garden. Adam meets Eve, and he goes, what? Wowza. Okay. And then right away in verse 24, it says this, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united with his wife, and they'll become what? One flesh. Jesus repeats this very verse himself in the Gospels as he's defining what marriage is all about. Now, how does our country define marriage today? Anything goes. Is that true? Absolutely not. Okay? Not according to God's word, okay? But according to whose word? Man's word. How dependable is man's word? Not so dependable. Okay? And so we have this huge confusion going on today. We see, just this week I was reading out in California well, let's get closer to home. In St. Paul now, the public library is beginning a what do they call it when they dress up? Drag. They're having drag reading times for little children. So they can bring drag queens in so kids can see them and so they can understand what diversity is. Yeah. Okay, let's not go there now. Let's be nice because we're going to talk about the love issue here. Okay? All right, so it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay? Why do we have to do this on a child level? Okay? Because if they don't get acclimated to this thought process as children, they're going to grow up and say what? You're wrong. Okay? People hate the light, and they want to live in the darkness. So if we can train our kids to live in the darkness and actually enjoy it under the guise of diversity, we won't have to be uncomfortable when somebody says, that is simply not true. What is marriage according to God? It's when a man and a woman come together and become one flesh. That's God's definition. Let's go to another issue. When does life begin? Okay, where do you define, what's your basis? Why do you believe that? Oh, I already have it up there. Oops. All right, if you're not looking at that, come on. Okay, Psalm 139, it's always that go-to passage for us who are pro-life, okay, who define the definition of life beginning at conception. Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16 from the Message version says this, oh yes, you shaped me first inside, then out. You formed me in my mother's womb. I thank, high God, you're breathtaking. Body and soul, I am marvelously made. I worship in adoration. What a creation. You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made, bit by bit, how I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All stages of my life were spread out before you, the days of my life all prepared before I had even lived one day. Okay, when I look at that, and when I hear what Jesus said, if you want to know what the truth is, you'll listen to what I have to say. Well, this is what God has to say. When does life begin? It begins at conception. At the moment of conception. How does our culture define the beginning of life today? We even have a hard time answering it, don't we? You know how I know how difficult it is? Because families who come to us who have had a miscarriage or have had a stillborn, over and over are telling us, even in the Christian community, there's no support there because the view is, I'm not even sure that was a valid life anyway. What? What? That's why we call it hidden grief. Families who especially have suffered a miscarriage can't even grieve out loud because people go many times, well, you can always have more. I don't know that, well, it was like only 12 weeks or 20 weeks. Watching Planned Parenthood, another undercover thing this week where they were making presentations about abortion and the people laughing about, one woman said, yeah, I know an eyeball popped out on the floor and it really grossed me out. And everybody laughed. According to the definition of the U.S. Supreme Court, life begins when the mother decides it does. Period. Is that true or false? It's false. In case you didn't know. It's false. Okay? The woman has no right to decide that. What's ironic to me is even in our culture, we get confused. Recently, there was a thing on the doctors, a TV program on TV where they had triplets that had come in. They were adults, and all three were pregnant at the same time. And so they were doing ultrasounds during the program to help them find out whether they were having a boy or a girl. So it was very exciting, and so they're finding out each one. I think, ironically, all three were pregnant with girls. And they said it out loud. You're going to have a girl. You're going to have a girl. You're going to have a girl. And everybody, oh, it's wonderful. They're going to have a girl. Well, how can you say that? According to our culture, that is not a girl. That's not a girl. That's a what? That's a fetus. That's a thing. Okay? What made it a girl in that program and not a thing? All three of the women wanted that child. And as a culture then, everybody could applaud and say, okay, well, this is a child. Do you see the issue we have in our culture? Do you see why truth is so important? We are a confused people, and children are being murdered. 300,000 babies will die this year through Planned Parenthood alone because they care for moms. Let's ask another one. Did humanity evolve from apes, or were we created? Okay, we're going to go with the created version. You know, we meet some people and we might think that could be a link. Okay. That true? I don't know. Maybe there's some feasibility here. Okay. Why do we believe that God created us? Because that's what he says. Okay? In Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. And then in Genesis 1:27, after God creates all the stuff that we see around us in the universe that's way out there, in Genesis 1:27 says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. What? Male and female, he created them. Okay, you could use this for our transgender issue as well today, okay? But we'll not go there at the moment. So, how did we evolve from apes or not? No. Our children taught that in school? Yes. Okay. And I think I've done this here before, but I love doing this. because to me it takes such incredible faith to believe in evolution, okay, that one day an ape in Africa or wherever he was or she was crawling around on all fours and suddenly stood up one day and said, wow. I don't know if he said wow like we say wow yet, but he went, all right, my back feels so much better. Yes, I like this. Of course, Mabel is over here. She's still down on all fours. Mabel, get up. Mabel gets up. Nice. And off Mabel and Harry go while the other apes are eating their bananas. Thinking, what just happened? And then there was us. Still eating bananas. Chiquita or Dole. Okay. It is so unreasonable when we look at the facts of the diversity and our DNA and the complexity not just of us, but even in the animal kingdom, even in the bug kingdom and those sorts of things, when you see the complexity of life, to think that somewhere out of nothing we began. And even Stephen Hawking now had to admit prior to his death, life cannot come from nothing. So where did it come from? Well, buckle up, because if you haven't heard it yet, you're going to hear more and more of this. Somewhere in this universe are aliens that came to this planet and started life as we know it. And we're the result. Now, we're laughing now, but you can look at me as a prophet in 10 or 15 years when this becomes really a pushed issue. Is that true or false? It's absolutely false. Okay? We were created, and God says, in His image. And just an aside, I wasn't going to do the transgender thing, but for those who have a transgender issue, it is not a choice issue. This is a mental illness issue. It is a mental illness issue. And for us to look at other people who have a transgender focus in their lives, we need to get them help, and that help is not acceptance of what they're saying they are. I don't care what Bruce Jenner says or Caitlin says these days. All right, let's go to one more and then we'll go. This is for us Christian people. Do all people end up going to heaven? Okay, good. I was wondering. Okay. Well, and some of you may be on the fence a little bit about that because it is an issue that we don't talk a lot about. But several years ago, a book came out, Love Wins. And the whole foundation of that book was by what I would call a former evangelical pastor, was that everybody ends up going to heaven in the end because love wins. Is that true or false? It's absolutely false. Why do I say that? Because in John chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus says that. Okay? By the way, Jesus who said to Pilate, if you want to know what the truth is, you'll listen to me. Okay, I'm going to tell you what the truth is. What's the truth? I am the way, the truth, and the life. What? What's it say? No one comes to the Father except through me. Okay? So we hear things, and I hear some incredibly bizarre things even after the death of certain individuals that we would look at and we, just by their lifestyle, would know, no. But we often hear at their funerals or their memorials, somebody will get up and say, well, I know Hugh is looking down on us and smiling right now. Well, guess what? Hugh Hefner is not looking down. He's looking up. That's a fact. Okay? The Bible clearly tells us that if we don't make a commitment to Jesus Christ, we're not going to what? We're not going to go to heaven. There's only one way. There's not multiple ways. There's not multiple gods. The truth of the fact is that from the book of Genesis to the book of Revelation, at the very end, in chapter 20 and 21, God makes it very clear, if your name isn't written in the Lamb's Book of Life, if you haven't made that commitment to Christ, you're going to go where? That's right, into the lake of fire. Okay. Can it be any more clear than that? I don't believe so. But if we remove this, okay, and that's why I'm saying if you want to know what the truth is, it lies here. And that's why people don't like the Bible these days. That's why they don't, they just don't like it. Because it what? It reveals truth. It reveals darkness in our lives. And isn't it true, even after you've made a commitment to Christ, when you've been reading Scripture from time to time and you know your life isn't where it should be, you know, you're living in a sin moment or something like that, and you're reading and God just says, you know, and you're reading and it's, there's my sin right there, and it calls it sin. Do you want to continue reading in that moment? Not always. I'll be honest. Not always. Maybe I just won't have devotions today. Why don't I want to have them? Because I know that this is the truth. And God's going to expose the darkness. And the words of Jesus are going to be absolutely true in John chapter 3. Men love the darkness more than they love the light. And when the light goes on, they hate it. And they hate those that expose the light. And there are lots of other issues we can look at today. Homosexuality, transgender, terrorism. Is the God of Islam the same God of the Jews and of Christians? Is there even a God? I mean, these are all issues that we look at today, and we have to come up with a truth factor. Okay? A truth factor. To me, the bottom line is simply this. We have to turn to Christ. Jesus said in John 8:32, you shall know the truth, and the truth will what? Make you free. It will set you free. Okay? But the world would imply that if we believe in this, we are what? Narrow-minded, bigoted, anti-everybody's. Okay? Don't buy the lie. The truth is, the truth will set you free. And that truth is in Jesus Christ, because in John 14, Jesus said what? I am the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say a truth or a partial truth or any truth. He said, I am the truth. I'm literally the embodiment of what is true. And so if you want to know what's true, you have to look to him. The truth is found in the Bible. Now let me close with this. How many Bibles do you might have at home? More than one? More than two? More than three? Okay, the reality is this. We have more Bibles in a church family than ever before. Okay? We have more versions of the Bible today than ever before. In fact, I don't even need my Bible. I can pull out Mr. Smart. And right here, I have an app. It says Holy Bible. Holy mackerel. And I can push it. And I can push a read button. And I can tell it where I want it to go. And it will go. And if I don't feel like reading, I just push another button. And somebody reads to me. But here's the rub, isn't it? Most believers are spending way more time on social media and watching TV than they'd ever dream of spending in this app. That's a fact. Okay. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, verse 14 through 16, "You are the light of the world." That's us. Those who are followers of Christ here today, that's us. Okay, if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, this isn't about you, but it's about those of us who are. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp to put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. Is it possible that we have a truth issue in America today simply because the church hasn't been very good about flooding the world with light? If I were to ask you biblically, as I did earlier, where does life begin? Why would you say that homosexuality is a sin? Why would you say that being a transgender is a mental issue? Why? If we were to look at different issues, you might be able to say, as we said at the very beginning, it's in the Bible. Well, sooner or later, somebody who doesn't know the Bible is going to say to you, what? Where? And then going like this, isn't a good response. I know it's there. I'll get back to you on that. Well, even with your app, by the way, you can do it right away. You can look really smart. Just do a search for a word. Okay. Is it possible that we have a truth issue in America today because when people look at believers, they really don't see a whole lot of difference between believers and unbelievers? See, when I hear believers talking about the Game of Thrones on HBO and how riveting it is, that's an issue. If you're watching porn like that, don't be talking to your friends that porn is a sin issue. That's a fact, by the way. By the way, HBO, if you've got it in your house, get rid of it. Or Cinemax, I just call it sin to the max. It's like having a sewer pipe connected to your TV. And if you think it's not making a difference to you, I'm going to guess that your light is under the bowl. Get out from underneath the bowl and start in the light. Let me close by this. We kind of mentioned this earlier, maybe, or implied this. When we talk to people about truth, we do it in love. Jesus always did it in love. He cared about the person more than he cared about winning a debate. He told them the truth straight up. But, as with Pilate, when he turned around and walked away, Jesus didn't run after him. That's what we need to do as followers of Christ. Give the truth in love. If they turn away and walk away, there's nothing we can do. But certainly don't call after them and say, you're going to burn for that. Well, they're not going to turn with that attitude. They'll know that we're followers of Christ because we love one another and for our love to other people. Learn the truth. If there are issues you're not aware of, find out what the Word has to say. Be ready so that when you sit down at work, you sit down at that party, you sit down at school, and that question comes up, you'll be able to say, but God's Word says. That's the truth. Let's pray.